Good afternoon. My name is Michael Eaton, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Collegiate Conference Association, sponsor of the National Model United Nations. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the 2013 closing ceremonies. On behalf of the NCCA Board, I would like to thank all of you for your hard work this week and congratulate you on your accomplishments. It also gives me great pleasure to introduce our first speaker today. Peter Launski-Tiefenthal has been Undersecretary General for Communications and Public Information since August of 2012. He is responsible for the work of the United Nations Department of Public Information. Between 2007 and 2012, Mr. Launski-Tiefenthal served as spokesman and head of the Department for Communication and Information of the Austrian Federal Ministry for European and International Affairs. He spent nearly 30 years within the Austrian Foreign Service, including stints in Asia, North America, and the Middle East, with responsibilities ranging from public diplomacy and development cooperation to press and information. He has held senior leadership positions in which he was responsible for formulating communication insights and strategies, including the extensive use of modern media tools and crisis management techniques. Please join me in welcoming the Undersecretary General.
Good afternoon. It's great. We are so happy to have you here. One can feel your energy, and it's great the way you are bringing this room, this very historic room, alive through your youth and your energy. And we very much hope that the days that you've spent here in New York were great, not just from the point of view of learning about the UN, but also of getting a glimpse of the city, even though I understand from some of your colleagues that you spent not just days but nights working on and learning about the United Nations. We would like to thank you that you've shown so much interest in the work of the UN and dedicated so much time. And we request you to go out there into the world and help us to tell the story that the United Nations write on a day-to-day basis to improve the life of people in need around this globe. I think it's a story worth telling, and there are no better ambassadors than you to help us tell the story and share these stories with the world. You are a very esteemed company. As some of you may know, the Secretary General himself is an alumnus of the Model United Nations program, and he's asked me to send you his greetings. He very much regrets that he cannot be here with you himself. I was very impressed when I looked at your program, since I've only joined the United Nations a little more than 6 months ago myself. I'm sure I could learn a lot from what you've learned over those last few days. I and we at the United Nations family hope that the kind of programs that you've gone through really provided you an insight, not just in how the UN works, but also that the result of that work should in the end benefit people in need anywhere around the world. We also hope that it showed you that in order to achieve global achievements, you need to spend time. You need to devote time to dialogue. You need to devote time sitting together, sorting out differences, and most importantly, finding common ground and building a consensus. We at the United Nations, we love this kind of program for all sorts of reasons. I mentioned the passion that you, the participants, bring to this program, which is infectious and contagious for us who are older, and we feed off the kind of energy that you are bringing with you, not just to this building, but to the entire United Nations program. The theme that you've chosen over this past week, Change Your World, is extremely timely, because as you know, the theme and the goal of the United Nations is exactly that, to create and work towards a better world, and through that to improve the lot and the fate of peoples wherever they may live. Like you, about half of the 7 billion individuals on this planet today are under 25 years of age. You are the largest generation ever of young people on this planet. This is why the United Nations is committed to partnering with you, with governments, with businesses, with teachers and with scholars, with activists and with civil society alike. We would like to find ways and means to empower youth, and we would like to get your say on how to bring about the kind of future all of us want. As the Secretary General told you in the message that he had shared with you, make your voices heard and drive political and social change. And wherever the Secretary General interacts with youth around the world, he calls on young people to make their contribution to that future, because the future is what is yours, and the world that you're working on will be your world. One young man already making his voice heard is here with us today. His name is Ahmed Al-Hindawi, and he's the newly appointed envoy on youth by the Secretary General. He's the first such UN envoy in the history of the United Nations. Since he joined us last month, Ahmed has hit the ground running, with more meetings than I think any one of us could imagine to squeeze into such a short period of time. It is my pleasure to, in a second, introduce Ahmed to you so that he can share some of his thoughts, some of his visions with you. However, before I end, I would like to stress again the importance of youth and the important role that all of you are playing. You are a force to be reckoned with, and the future really belongs to you. Thank you so much, and may I now request Ahmed to join us.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Under Secretary General, and it's a great pleasure to address you today. It's another youthful day in the United Nations. United Nations. Do you know why it's called United Nations? Everybody can have an answer for this question. For me, it's United Nations because it's mandated to unite nations based on human rights, development, peace and security, based in putting our world to make it more sustainable and to move it forward, to make a better place for us and for the generations to come. It's only one planet, and this planet has only one United Nations. What you are doing here is not only a simulation, it's an attempt to understand how it works, how our world is working today, and how you can be involved. My work is, as the United Nations Secretary General, envoy for youth. But I am also the envoy, the youth envoy to the United Nations. And you are all today are envoys in one way or another to understand the United Nations and to take the United Nations back home with your networks and with your organizations. It's not about changing the world. Changing the world is a nice slogan to think about. For me, it's about changing in the world to make it a better place for all of us. If you think of all innovators, all the great successes that we have witnessed in our history, it always started with a low-scale kind of innovations and projects, and it scaled up until it reached and changed our world. Facebook, if you think about it, it started just to link students in a community or a campus. That was the attempt only. Somebody who thought about changing something in his campus, and now he's changing all of our lives. We need you closer to the United Nations, and the Secretary General has made it clear that working with and for young people is a top priority for this organization. To do that, you need to be close to the United Nations, to align your work with the work of the United Nations. In fact, the number of workers in the United Nations and people working in this organization are less than those who are working for some of the fast food restaurants. So it's not about working in the organization, it's about working with the United Nations. It's about always trying to understand how the UN works, and this is what you are doing today, and to make your work always close to the United Nations. We are at crossroad, as you know. 1,000 days left to the MDGs, and after the MDGs, we are discussing the post-development agenda. You know the word social contract, right? What we are discussing today is a development contract for our planet for 15 years. Your participation, your involvement is important, not only in continue meeting the Millennium Development Goals, but in putting a new rules for how the world should be in the next 15 years. I'm sure many of you hear about the consultation the United Nations is leading now to hear about your voices for the world you want. Do you know about the online campaign, The World We Want? Who knows about it? Well, then you should know. I think it's another way to be involved. But it's not only about asking you how the world should be in 15 years. It's about you envisaging your roles and position yourself in this development plan so you can be part of that implementation. The UN doors is open, and I believe it will continue to be open for young people to work with young people to make it a better place for all of us. Please feel always free to contact me or follow me on Twitter at Ahmed Al-Hindawi. And I will be happy always to continue, this conversation virtually and hopefully to meet some of you or all of you in other places. Again, welcome to the United Nations. This is your place. And what you are doing here is not only a simulation or just a model United Nations. It's a serious attempt to understand how the world works and then to put yourself in a place where you can make it a better place for all of us. Thank you very much.
Ahmed, the Special Envoy of the Secretary General, Mr. Lonsky Tiefenthal, the Undersecretary General, thank you again on behalf of the NCCA Board and all the assembled delegates, not only for your inspiring words, but also for your example and your leadership. Please join me again in recognizing our speakers as they exit back to their busy schedules.
I forgot something very important. I thanked you for coming, but I also wanted to thank the NCCA board and all those who made this event possible for their big effort. It's a big undertaking, as you imagine, not the least logistically. And UN is not always the easiest partner to deal with. So thank you so much. We are really delighted.
As we continue the ceremony, I'll invite our Secretary General for the conference to take the center chair and our Chief of Staff to ascend to the upper podium, and then use the Undersecretary General's remarks as a transition to offer my own thanks to the NCCA Board of Directors, to the staff, to the advisors, and most importantly, to you, the delegates. Members of the NCCA board seated to my right are responsible for the long-term financial and educational integrity of the National Model United Nations. We are a non-governmental organization in the United States and affiliated with the United Nations Department of Information. I would like to introduce you to those members of the board who are present. Others attended the previous week of the conference or will be coming to the second closing ceremony at 4 o'clock. I would ask that you hold your applause until all members have been introduced, and ask the members to please stand as their names are called. The President of the NCCA, Richard Raitano, Vice President Richard Murgo, Professor Kevin Grisham, Professor Marketa Zhitkova, Stephen Holloway, Ambassador Joseph Melrose, and if I could also invite any members of the NCCA or NMUN-New York advisory boards, including the newly elected members, Dr. Joanne Avial and Ronnie Heinze, to please also stand and join me in thanking them for their work. At this time, it also gives me pleasure to invite President Raitano to the podium for his closing remarks. Professor Richard Raitano.
Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Board of Directors of the National Collegiate Conference Association, which also sponsors NMUN Washington and this past January sponsored NMUN Latin America and the Galapagos, please accept the Board's thanks for a truly memorable week at NMUN New York. Many thanks to you, our delegates, for your very hard work this week, and thanks also to our outstanding volunteer and professional staffs for their dedication, their high standards of excellence, and for their patience. I've been asked to be brief in my concluding comments, and I will be brief. For so many former delegates who have corresponded with me over the years, and I know this is true of other faculty advisors as well, the words the delegates use so often to describe their experiences at NMUN is life-changing. I know this past week you delegates worked very hard. You wrote outstanding resolutions and reports, and very few, if any of you, were passive bystanders in your committees and councils. A former delegate recently wrote and told me, no matter what profession I end up in, I understand that well-practiced teamwork techniques will be imperative. I learned how to communicate effectively with fellow delegates at NMUN. There were strong personalities in the conference room, and trying to work with all these complex dispositions was a real challenge, but I have learned to withhold judgment. My experience at NMUN has also prepared me to be timely and efficient. It has prepared me to be open and accepting and to work well with others. Robert F. Kennedy, who was a United States Attorney General, a U.S. Senator, a presidential candidate in 1968, and my political hero, once remarked that few will have the greatness to bend history itself, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events, and in the total of all those acts will be written the history of this generation. He also said on another occasion, all of us might wish at times that we lived in a more tranquil world, but we don't. And if our times are difficult and perplexing, so are they challenging and filled with opportunity. The great South African patriot and hero Nelson Mandela once remarked, "For to be free is not merely to cast off one's chains, but to live in a way that respects and enhances the freedom of others." Finally, I am reminded of what is so often, and in my judgment, unfairly said to characterize your generation: overparented, unfocused, and lazy. I reject those characterizations because I believe that the overwhelming majority of you want to do the right things with your lives, and you're open to being challenged and to make a difference in the world around you. You took advantage this week, for example, of an opportunity to examine global problems, and you made a good and honest effort to offer realistic and effective solutions. Don't ever forget the lessons you learned and will take with you from this time and place. These lessons include working hard and together, trying to find common ground, and understanding that although we may have policy, cultural, ethnic, and national differences, we must be united as human beings in common cause on this planet and live our lives, as Nelson Mandela observed, to help create solutions to problems which threaten and affect us all. Finally, I am always reminded of what the great Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw once wrote: "Some men see things as they are and say, why? I dream things that never were and say, why not?" To the young women and men in this hall, you dreamed some things this week to make the world a better place. So now go home and in your own way act on those dreams, and never, never, never give up on yourselves, on making governments better, on changing policies, and on your ability to make a difference in your own lives and in the lives of our fellow human beings. Thank you.
As you can tell from his words, Dr. Raitano is also an inspiring professor. So as we acknowledge your work today, as you leave, please also join me in acknowledging the hard work of all of the faculty advisors who have helped prepare you for this week. Thank you to all the advisors that are there. NMUN conferences include this event here in New York, an annual event in Washington, D.C., and we invite you to consider attending both of these. In addition, we will have 2 new events in the 2013-2014 year, NMUN Korea and NMUN Northwest. Last Thursday, at the closing ceremonies of Week A, Helen Lee of Yonsei University, the Secretary General, described the upcoming conference. She could not be here today, but let me use her words to invite you next November to come to South Korea and celebrate the UN legacy in the peninsula, featuring tours of the demilitarized zone, cultural visits to palaces, connections to the United Nations offices, including the Global Climate Fund and the modern facilities of Songdo International City in the Greater Seoul metropolitan area. NMUN.org has additional details about this upcoming conference. The Secretary General of NMUN Northwest is able to be here, and I ask you to join me in welcoming him to give a brief description of this new conference. Samir Kanal.
Thank you to Michael Eaton and the entire Board of Directors and Advisory Board of the National Model United Nations, to Secretary General Miriam Mueller, and my friends here on staff, and to you, the delegates, head delegates, faculty advisors, and guests here today. On behalf of Northwest Model United Nations, I am pleased to announce this new conference, which combines the strengths of National Model United Nations, held each spring here in New York, with the strengths of Northwest Model United Nations, held each November in Seattle. On behalf of both organizations, I am pleased to invite you to National Model United Nations Northwest, which will be held February 14th through 16th of 2014. Our conference will be held in Portland, Oregon, in the heart of the Pacific Northwest, in the shadow of the Cascade Mountains, and just a short drive from the majestic Oregon coast. The city itself is filled with dozens of unique neighborhoods to explore, a historic waterfront which is home to the conference venue, and a welcoming, socially conscious population that will welcome you and your team with open arms. Simply put, there's nowhere in the world quite like Portland. More information, including registration and financial details, will be available in the coming weeks at www.nmun.org. We're committed to providing a high-quality conference that is affordable as well for your delegates. We look forward to welcoming you next February to Portland, the City of Roses, for National Model United Nations Northwest. Thank you.
Samir also served this past year as an Assistant Secretary General at the other NMUN New York last week. We are grateful to him as well as to all of the volunteer and professional staff that helped make this conference happen. Please join me in welcoming the Director General of NMUN New York to review the substantive work of you and the staff this past week. Nicholas Warino.
Thank you, Michael. Dear advisors, staff members, and guests, honorable delegates. Citizens around the world are skeptical and uncertain about the future. The institutions of old are dysfunctional and unable to adapt to the challenges of today. In such an environment, history has taught us that cynicism and distrust are expected and ways of conflict and violence likely. And yet, in the last 5 days, 3,000 students from around the world showed us why hope remains possible. These students used months of research and preparation, along with their wits and tenacity, to work together to build templates of how to solve many of the world's most pressing problems. They have tackled the crisis in Mali, global climate change, human trafficking, and much more. More inspirationally, they have shown us that cooperation can overcome competition. Delegates, you should be proud of what you accomplished this week. I ask you to take this momentum, embrace the future, and help change the world for the better. It is now my honor to welcome the Secretary General of the National Model United Nations New York Conference, Miriam Mueller.
dear members of the Board of Directors, the Advisory Board, NMUN volunteer staff, advisors, delegates. It has been a long week, but standing here in the Great Hall of the United Nations and looking into your faces, I can see the spirit of the United Nations. I've seen you debating rigorously, negotiating on your topics, and finding compromises on your resolutions and reports. I know you worked hard, and you can be really proud of what you have achieved. These achievements would not have been possible without hard work and little sleep, not only by you, but also by a great team of outstanding people, the NMUN senior staff. Their leadership throughout this week has been essential to making this conference a success. Please hold your applause until I have reintroduced them all, and they're all standing. Director General Nicholas Verino. Nick is the highest-ranking substantive officer at this conference, responsible for the background guides, resolutions, reports, training. Over the last year and this week, Nick has worked tirelessly. Thank you for everything that you have given to this conference. Chief of Staff, Thera Watson. As Chief of Staff, there's little you're not responsible for, and Thera has always managed to stay on top of everything. Thera, I knew I could always rely on you. Thank you for this. You have made my job so much easier. Assistant Secretary General for External Affairs, Yizhong Xiao. Assistant Chief of Staff, Lucas Carreras. Under Secretary General, General Assembly, Daniel Leva. Under Secretary General, Economic and Social Council, Harald Eisenhower. Under Secretary General for Development, Theo Tiefri. Under Secretary General for Human Rights and Humanitarian Affairs, Sarah Tully. Under Secretary General for Peace and Security, Katharina Weinert. Under Secretary General, Conference Services, Sarah Johnson. Thank you. And now, I want to thank and reintroduce the NMUN volunteer staff. They have been the ones running your committees, editing papers during the night, printing every paper for voting, handling all of your questions, and in short, they have been the heart for this conference. I cannot express how grateful I am and how honored I feel for having had the chance to work with such an amazing team of outstanding people. Every one of them gave so much to this conference, and they are the ones who made this conference possible. The NMUN Volunteer Staff 2013. When I was sitting in my first closing ceremony, I was exhausted and tired, but I was also exhilarated. I had experienced the passion and energy of NMUN, debating, negotiating, and finally reaching compromises, producing and passing resolutions together, knowing that these resolutions were the best compromise and presented our resolutions to the topic. As I was sitting here, I knew that I wanted to stay involved. I wanted to go back home and wanted to stay engaged in politics, the United Nations, and the world that surrounds me. Our theme for this conference, Change Your World, reflects that. As I have mentioned in my opening speech, NMUN has changed my life, and I wanted, through NMUN, to affect and change your lives. You might have spoken in front of 400 people or been leading a group through negotiations, finding compromises in the end. You might have had to represent positions of countries that might have conflicted with your own beliefs. All these experiences not only have educated you, but are also part of your personal development and growth. You not only learned about the United Nations and your topics or committees, but also about yourself. And this does not end with this conference. Our theme, Change Your World, also wants to inspire you to carry on, to take this conference and your experiences home with you to change your worlds. My sincere hope is that this week at NMUN opened your eyes to the world around you, and for the fact that we all need each other, that we all depend on each other to work together, to take responsibility for each other and our world. Quoting former Secretary General Kofi Annan, more than ever before in human history, we share a common destiny. We can master it only if we face it together. And that, my friends, is why we have the United Nations. In the past week, you have shown that you understand the challenge of working together and the energy it takes. And you have experienced the excitement of working jointly for solutions. Speaking from my experience, I'm sure you'll overcome your exhaustion so you can enjoy the delegate stands tonight and meet with your partners in committee, simply being yourself and having fun together. This is also part of NMUN, meeting a diverse group of people, working together and becoming friends. I have met some of my closest friends through NMUN, whether it was as a delegate or on staff. And I still cherish our time at NMUN together, and it will always be a part of me. The personal connections that I have made through NMUN will stay with me wherever I go. From this moment on, as NMUN reaches its end for this year, I hand over the challenge to you. It is now in your hands what you do with your education, your experience, your passion, your inspiration. Mahatma Gandhi said, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." Take NMUN with you and change your worlds. Thank you.
On behalf of all of us, thank you, Miriam, for an outstanding year as Secretary General. Your leadership over many years has contributed significantly to the quality of learning at NMUN, and your commitment and example are simply groß artig, which I believe means awesome, and if not, someone gave me a poor translation. But congratulations, Miriam, for all of your work this past year. And now the awards. Although NMUN recognizes the potential of awards to foster competition rather than collaboration, we continue to offer them in response to the majority of participating schools. The Secretariat selects recipients based on a criteria and methodology outlined at nmun.org. We acknowledge that no one can observe every action in committee or truly judge an individual's learning and growth. We believe that participation in this simulation is its own reward. It advances understanding of the United Nations and contemporary international issues, and as Professor Raitano mentioned, it has changed the lives of many delegates. We urge all of you, delegates, advisors, to maintain appropriate perspective regarding the awards. The fundamental basis of this simulation is collaboration and cooperation among nations, which includes working together through multilateral diplomacy. There are no winners and certainly no losers in this process. Remaining in character, participating in committee, proper use of the rules of procedure are all equally important in the overall awards determination process. The formulas and the mathematical equations are available online. Here we will give overall delegation awards in the categories of honorable mention, distinguished delegation, and outstanding delegation. Honorable position paper awards are judged by the committee staff, and outstanding delegates in committee are voted by peers. The posting that was made available this morning and is on the website is listed in alphabetical order. At the conclusion of the ceremony, those delegations receiving awards are welcome to come down, their head delegates, to receive the certificates that are below me on the podium to be distributed by the Secretary General and Director General of the conference. We ask that when the awards are named, out of respect for this neutral international space, that individuals stand together and stand in silence until all names are read, and we will give one round of applause for each of the categories. Before announcing the delegation awards, I would like to begin by recognizing all those delegates who were nominated by their peers in committee yesterday afternoon and recognized as outstanding delegates in committee. Those receiving that recognition from their peers, will you please stand together and be acknowledged by the body? In individual committees, we also recognized outstanding position papers for the quality of preparation before you came to the conference. Those two were announced in committee. Will anyone receiving recognition for their outstanding position paper please stand so we can recognize your hard work? Congratulations. The first category of team, of delegation awards, is the honorable mentions. Again, I will read the names of the schools individually. When the first name is read, if that school could stand and stand in silence and remain standing as the other schools are listed and countries they are representing. There should be no individual applause. We will recognize the entire group at the end of each category. The honorable mention delegations. Austria, represented by the National University. Bangladesh, De La Salle College of St. Benilde. Belgium, Monmouth University. Bolivia, Cedarville University. Canada, California State University at Fullerton. Chile, Western Washington University. Congo, Copenhagen Business School. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, the University of Colorado, Boulder. Denmark, the joint delegation of Pulaski University and Valdosta State University. Estonia, Luis Guido Carli. Ethiopia, Ohio Northern University. Guatemala, Bellevue College. Honduras, DHBW Lorach. The Islamic Republic of Iran, Augusta State University. Kazakhstan, Chemnitz University of Technology. The Maldives, Francis Marion University. Mauritania, Luis Guido Carli. Montenegro, Eastern Michigan University. Norway, the University of Dayton. Oman, the University of St. Gallen. The Russian Federation, Benedictine University. St. Kitts and Nevis, Giovanni Campane nel Mondo. Singapore, the American University of Sharjah. Slovakia, Baylor University. South Sudan, the University of Bridgeport. Sweden, the University of Regensburg. Tunisia, Collège Montmorency. Turkmenistan, the University of Central Florida. The United Arab Emirates, Tallahassee Community College, and the United States of America, Università degli Studi di Firenze. Please join me in acknowledging the tremendous work of these delegations. Thank you. The next category of award is distinguished delegations, again as before. If those groups mentioned could stand in silence without any individual applause, we will recognize the group at the end. The distinguished delegations at the 2013 National Model United Nations, New York. Algeria, Friedrich Alexander Universität Erlangen-Nürnberg. Angola, John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Argentina, Université de Montréal. Azerbaijan, the College of Europe. The Bahamas, University of Washington. Benin, Euromed Management. Botswana, Collège André Grasset. Brazil, Université du Québec à Montréal, École des Sciences de la Gestion, more or less. I apologize for my French. Brunei Darussalam, Università degli Studi di Padova. China, the Hudson River Group. Croatia, SUNY Oneonta. The Czech Republic, Syracuse University, the Maxwell School. The Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the University of Texas at Dallas. Indonesia, Georgia State University. Lao People's Democratic Republic, Université Saint-Louis, Bruxelles. Latvia, the American University of Beirut. Liechtenstein, the University of California at Santa Barbara. Luxembourg, Florida Atlantic University. Mexico, the ESB Business School at Reutlingen University. Nicaragua, Dawson College. Nigeria, the University of California, Riverside. Oxfam, California State University, Sacramento. Panama, California State Polytechnic University at Pomona. Saudi Arabia, Université du Québec à Montréal. Slovenia, the City College of New York. South Africa, Université Laval. Sudan, the University of Ottawa. The Syrian Arab Republic, Albert Ludwigs Universität. And Tonga, Christian Albrechts Universität zu Kiel. Please join me in acknowledging the work of these delegations. The next category is the outstanding delegations. Again, if the groups mentioned could please stand in silence and we'll acknowledge them at the end of the listing. Barbados, represented by Riverside Community College. Burkina Faso, Universidad Católica Andrés Bello. Ecuador, the University of Heidelberg. Eritrea, Georgia State University. Finland, Georgia Southern University. France, Royal Holloway, the University of London. Germany, Austin College. Ghana, the University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh. Ireland, Patrick Henry College. Israel, Rider University. Japan, Université Libre de Bruxelles. Jordan, the American University in Cairo. Lebanon, Victor Valley College. Palestine, California State University at San Bernardino. Papua New Guinea and Sierra Leone, both represented by Alma College. Somalia, Erasmus Universiteit Rotterdam. Timor-Leste, the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh. Turkey, California State University, San Bernardino. Uruguay, Florida International University. And Vietnam, the University of New Orleans. Please join me in recognizing the work of these delegations. And as we conclude the awards and I introduce for the last time to close the conference the Secretary General, let me invite you one more time and invite the staff as well to acknowledge all delegations for their tremendous work this past week. Congratulations to you all.
Thank you. Are there any points or motions on the floor? Brazil, to what point of motion do you rise? Thank you, Delegate. This motion is in order. Every delegation in favor of adjourning the meeting until next year, please raise your placards or hands. Thank you. Thank you, delegates. Every delegation opposed? Thank you. This motion clearly passes. The meeting of the National Model United Nations, New York 2013 is now adjourned.